Well, to talk about how relevant such best of lists are and to explore the restaurant industry, I'm joined by Anya Levkh, a food writer based in Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So what do judges look at with the world's best restaurant list when really making these picks?
The process is fairly confidential, but if you look at most awards programs around the world, they do tend to have commonalities. So they are looking for a certain refinement in the food, in the service, in the overall experience, the ambiance of the room. In the end, though, one can say it's really the chef who carries the day.
And a lot of people are wondering how out of touch some of these lists are. Talk about some of the changes that they're trying to make in these contests, especially after these criticisms, and how these changes are being received.
Well, yes, the world's 50 best list certainly encountered its fair share of criticism over the years, really since it launched in 2002. And one of those main criticisms was that it is very focused on European and North American restaurants. And that certainly is still true today. Over half of the restaurants on that list are from Europe or North America. The winning restaurant this year is obviously French, and there has been a perception that it's very exclusionary towards continents like Africa, which has many countries and a vast range of cuisines, to Asia, where, you know, why is a place like China, for instance, mainland China, which has more restaurants than probably all of Canada, why is such an area so overtly excluded? And although you do see more representation when you get into the regional lists, like the 50 best of Asia, the 50 best of North America, etc., there is still this lack of representation, just as there is a lack of gender diversity among the winners. There were 5 women chefs on the list this year, which is the same number as last year.
So you mentioned a couple of issues, obviously. Well, let's start with China and really not being included in a lot of these lists, not really having a strong presence. What's being done to really not just up the profile, but really get more inclusion when it comes to China and all of these African restaurants as well?
That's a very interesting question, because on the surface, when you look at the 50 Best Awards and how they divide their regions, it's divided into 26 regions. There are over 1,000 voters, mainly anonymous, who take part in this process. And yet, for some reason, you have vast swaths of areas that are simply ignored, it seems, or else, you know, for instance, in the case of Asia, you have a restaurant that wins a top spot, but is run by someone who is French. And there have been, I think, efforts at the organization. They've certainly tried to reach gender parity. They now say that they have an equal number of male and female voters. They do try to focus on the various regions equally, but the process of how then the finalists are collected into that top 50 list is still shrouded in a bit of mystery. And so what they're doing to truly expand their horizons, so to speak, and show more of the diversity that we certainly have in the restaurant world, right, is a very good question, but one that I think we still don't have an answer for.
Now, I do quickly want to get to the pros and cons. Obviously, when you win one of these prestigious titles, a lot of people are wondering, does that help your bottom line? But are there also any downsides to being either topping or being included in these lists?
Absolutely. And that is the reason for one of the changes that happened with this year's awards. They instituted a rule to say that if you are a previous first place winner, you can no longer be considered. So, for instance, Osteria Francescana in Modena, which has won first place in the past, is no longer eligible for this year. And other restaurants that have been in the top. Noma in Copenhagen is an interesting exception to that rule. because they opened a new location and what they call a new concept in 2018, which then made them eligible to be considered, and they ended up getting second place this year.
So certainly some workarounds there. Thank you so much. Food writer Anya Levkh there.